right into it.
One of these guys who came into Barringer after some of the major events, and I found that it was a really exciting place to be. I sort of done my academic stint, and then I worked for the government, and I'd finally gone back to industry, which was Barringer. And to me, it was sort of like going home in the sense that I discovered that I really liked the private sector as opposed to the government university sector per se. And one of the things that with Barringer and with Tony and all the things that were there, you've already heard some of these discussions, is that it was a place of ideas. Things happen, you know, and it was a really entrepreneurial setting. I mean, if you want to know what entrepreneurial business is all about, Tony's the man, okay? He had ideas, visions, and he would follow them and chase them, and he'd make them happen. And I guess that's really the magic about the whole Barringer alumnus, is there's a whole bunch of us around. And we went there, and we got inspired. We learned a heck of a lot of things. We had to do things. We learned what not to do sometimes, because we certainly did things that weren't right and went in the wrong direction. But the ideas were great. It was a matter of execution. And so for me, it was sort of, boy, I learned a hell of a lot about what to do and what not to do in a very short period of time. Now, one of the things that nobody really talks about, but Tony was a tremendous marketer, okay? I mean, and we don't give him credit for that, but I mean, these brand names and names of systems, like we got Input, Cotran, Laser Trace, CoSpec, Surgeries, all these sort of things. And they would brand the products and really think about it. And it's a very different kind of part of this business that we don't think about very much. He was a master of that. That plus the patents and the whole sort of that part of the game is really something which I saw and admired and learned a lot from. Now, one of the things most people here probably don't know is I learned a lot about geochemistry while I was there. One of the first jobs I had at Barringer was doing surveys. And we were doing geochemical surveys. And the way it was done is you had a helicopter with a big hose on it, and you vacuumed up the ground as you flew along. Literally, you sucked up dirt off the ground. And one of the things that was neat is that you took this dirt and it went through a centrifuge, and the particles were stuck on sticky tape, like referred to earlier. And that in itself is pretty innovative, okay? But then this thing would go into a laser analysis system. Well, this was like, you know, late 70s. Well, I was at a U.S. National Research Council review meeting on stuff for Mars and contamination and so on, and it was at a place in California which was a pretty high-end biotech area. They're doing genetic engineering and doing all sorts of stuff. And they took us for a tour of their plant. And this was about 6 months ago. And they showed us this wonderful thing they developed. They were taking these samples and putting them on sticky tape and analyzing them with a laser. This is 25 years later, okay? So everything that Tony did was always way ahead of its time. To me, probably the most critical thing is that I was involved in EM. And EM is still close to my heart, and I do a lot of that stuff. And I learned a lot working with Tony and the whole group there. And the one thing that was always a problem were these birds which we used to fly sensors in. And you'll hear it from everybody in this group who ever worked at Barringer. Toad birds, next thing is microphonics and noise that you pick up on the sensors. And I know that one time Tony was traveling somewhere on a plane, he read something in the plane on a magazine saying, well, you know, owls have these great, you know, low noise capacity for dropping out of the air. And it's the feathers and how they feather themselves as they come down. Well, the next idea was, well, we got to have feathers on our toad bird. Well, we couldn't find feathers easily, so the next best solution was sort of a fuzzy hair. So the guy in the purchasing department was sent out immediately as Tony arrived in the office to buy some wigs. So we had this bird with hair all over it, flying through the air trying to cut down on the noise. And for those of us who were involved in that whole thing, I can still remember flying this neoprene-covered bird at -40, where the neoprene was like solid cement. But this was all part of the trying to be innovative and change the dynamics. And the last part, I think was really interesting when I was working at Barringer. Tony was in Denver, and I was in Toronto. And this was before the time of the real fax machine. This is about sort of, you know, 8 or 9 years before fax machines became ubiquitous. Everybody had one. Then in those days, Tony would send something up to the office and be faxed. Well, there'd be a lady in the office in Denver and a lady in the office in Toronto. And it would take all day to get one page through. And it was just an absolute miracle to see this document finally get through the system. But that's again, like everything else that was in Barringer, a lot of it was way ahead of its time because of the creative sort of genius and sort of ideas and vision that Tony had. I think for our industry, we've got a guy here who is really the entrepreneurial kind of guy who's a legacy for everybody here. If you watch and look what he did, he's the kind of person that we should all look up to because it's the kind of thing we need in our industry. So for me, Tony, thanks a lot. I learned a hell of a lot. It was a good time.